If you've seen any of my other videos, then you know that I own a 2016 Porsche Macan. And in this video, I'll compare my Macan to this 2019 Range Rover, because what else am I going to do with my life? I've always been a big fan of these Range Rovers, so I'm very interested to see how a British SUV stacks up with a German sports SUV. Now, a Cayenne might be a better comparison to this one, but since I own a Macan, I decided why not just do this. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to focus on comparing the looks, the interior, how it drives, and talk about the expenses and the costs of owning these cars, and give you my opinion of which one you should go with. Let's get into it, shall we? I looked at these two cars side by side for a long time, and my first thought was I should really own both of these because that's how much I like them. The Porsche is definitely sleeker. It looks fast. I love the front end, although the back end I'm a little iffy on. Don't like the styling there quite as much. The Range Rover, on the other hand, is awesome from just about every angle. It's got a real presence. It's aggressive. The proportions are just right. And in this color, it looks even better. Looking at them like this side by side, I think the Range Rover wins this round. Comparing the inside of my Macan to this one, there's a 3-year gap. Mine is a 2016, this is a 2019. So here you already see a more advanced technology. You got the 2 screens, which is very unique for the Range Rover, and I love this. The only problem is it doesn't work real well. It's laggy, it's slow. But the design is great, especially the split of the 2 screens and the way they've integrated all these buttons on the screen. In the Macan, there's a lot of buttons and there's not a lot of tech that I can be overly excited about. But what I wanted to talk about though is the quality of the interior materials. In the Range Rover, you have these cheap plastic bits, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. This is a $100,000 car. And they have good materials in here, they just don't have it everywhere. The touch of some of these things are fine, but then you have the plastic everywhere that wears out and it doesn't look good, and it really takes away from the high-end feel of the Range Rover. So because of that reason, I'm gonna give the edge to the Macan, even though it's older. And you get a real good sense of German engineering. The quality of everything in the Macan is just better, the feel and the touch. And that's a real testament to German engineering, that even after 7 years, things are still intact, they look good, and not filled with scratches everywhere. The obvious answer when it comes to driving is that the Porsche Macan is the clear winner. Obviously, it's a Porsche after all, and I don't have to make any adjustments when driving the Macan versus any other sports sedan. It's just that good. But I am surprised and impressed with how good the Range Rover is when it comes to driving. Considering how big and bulky it is, it's remarkably stable and composed, and that's not something I was expecting. This Range Rover is clearly not an Olympic athlete when it comes to agility and just being nimble, but it does stuff on the weekends. You know, it stays in shape, it goes out for the occasional run. So it can handle the size and heft of it. And so the handling is really not all that bad on this. By the way, keep in mind that the Range Rover that I'm driving is the Sport 340 horsepower version. Obviously, the Autobiography or the SVR would be completely different beasts, but the Macan S that I drive also has the same power. It is faster though because it's a smaller, lighter vehicle, but it's interesting to note that both of these cars have the exact same power output. Nobody's expecting a Range Rover to have all of this handling prowess. Where the Range Rover really does shine though is the ride comfort. This is where I have to give the edge to Range Rover because it's definitely a cushy, comfortable ride. It's quiet, refined. Here I'll say that the Porsche Macan is actually very close to this one. Now on these turns, there's definitely some body roll and you feel the weight of the Range Rover. But it's still not hard to drive at all. You're still completely in control. And at no point do you feel like the Range Rover isn't capable of just normal day-to-day driving and handling. I actually like how the Range Rover drives generally, and pleasantly surprised by how well it's able to handle the size and weight of it. So the Range Rover is not just good for the driver and comfortable for the driver, but the real benefit is all of your passengers. They're going to be really happy in the back seat, just riding along in this quiet, luxurious Range Rover. I'll tell you this, if you have people that you want to take for a ride, they're going to prefer to go for a ride in the Range Rover over the Porsche because this is just nicer and more comfortable. And who wouldn't want to be in a Range Rover? The Porsche is something that you'd want to get in and drive, but in terms of people wanting to ride in the car, I think they would pick this. Now, the moment that you've been waiting for, costs. This Range Rover is going to be a little more expensive than the Porsche Macan if you get a certified pre-owned. Mine was in the mid-30s. This one is closer to 50 if you get a warranty with it. I would not recommend getting either of these two cars, the Macan, a Porsche, or a Range Rover without a warranty, because if these things break, you have no idea how much you're going to spend. I did notice though that with the Range Rover, the certified pre-owned can only be a car that's less than 5 years old, under 60,000 miles. My Macan is 7 years old and it still came with the pre-owned warranty. So that might give you a little bit of a hint as to how unreliable these cars might be. If Porsche is willing to bet on giving you a warranty on an older car, then they have more confidence and belief, not so much for Land Rover. So all in all, with costs, reliability, driving, and everything that I talked about, I'm still very happy with the Porsche, and I think I would still go with it. But the Range Rover is so close, and it's such a cool car that it's worth owning at least once. But I would never own a Range Rover without a warranty because they're notorious for air suspension problems. And the last thing I want to do is end up with a Range Rover with the rear end that's 6 inches higher than the front end. With unreliable German and British machines, you just never know what you're gonna get.